going to jump right into it with some report outs. So yesterday, we had a number of groups do some breakout sessions in which they explored different opportunities and challenges within the tracks of regulatory, things having to do with regulations around drones, things having to do with drone technology, and then finally, what is the infrastructure surrounding these things. So we're going to have some of them come up and report out to us. Kazi waliofanikiwa. Okay? All right, so I would like to begin today by introducing the lead of the Drone and Tomorrow Airspace Project at the World Economic Forum, Mr. Harrison Wolf. Karibuni sana.
Hello, does this work? Whoa, all right, it works. Thank you, everybody. First of all, thank you to our gracious hosts, to the World Bank, to Mwanza. We had a phenomenal day yesterday talking about regulations, performance-based approach, and listening to one another. And I feel very inspired about what's going on throughout Africa in the form of leadership for drones, for RPAS, for unmanned aircraft systems, whatever you want, whatever terminology you want to use. So what we did yesterday was look to a short conversation around performance-based regulations, understanding what took place here in the demonstrations, all the work that had to go into it, from ops manual development, safety management systems, coordination with air traffic control, so on and so forth, to address the risks associated with unmanned systems, but accomplish the overall mission. What I think was the most important was starting the conversation in breakout groups yesterday and getting Civil Aviation Authority, AFCAC, ICAO, IATA, working together and looking at what's possible. We started by identifying what regulatory approvals are being approached. What are people looking to do from the government side and the private industry side? And it kind of fell into these clusters of opportunity, as we like to say. From people being approached for training, for surveying, from aerial photography and weddings, to infrastructure inspections, wildlife management, and of course this massive heat map over here. I'm being asked to switch. Oh, that's much better. In drone delivery, if you were to look at this to just see what the interests are, we can of course see photography is huge, aerial surveying and mapping, but also wildlife survey, disaster management, and agricultural. And from the opportunity, we looked at challenges. And these are all developed by those participating. So thank you all for your openness and candid approach to this. These are the challenges clustered for what civil aviation authorities and leaders in this community need and the barriers to overcome. Security is, of course, very important. The technological reliability, understanding what's possible, what's reality and what's not reality yet. Of course, safety and crew competency. But I was inspired by the government authorities in the room saying, you know what, we need to learn. We need to continue to engage each other to understand what's possible. Registration is, of course, important. Legislation and the empowerment of the CAAs to overcome some of these challenges, to have the authority to authorize new opportunities. And, of course, data from the aircraft. The last step was moving from opportunities, identifying the challenges, but then identifying what they need to overcome those challenges. And from the safety management world, we like to call these mitigations. We say, if you can identify a challenge, you can identify the opportunity to overcome that challenge, which I think is in the spirit of the LVC. So together, we identified checklists, operations manuals, monitoring software in the form of UTM or health system management, proving out that these systems are reliable and can be trusted. Test areas and regulations, similar to what's been going on in Malawi, where you start in one small area and build out what's possible from there to attract innovation and to support an industry. And then finally, and perhaps most interesting to me, was empowering ministries that aren't just civil aviation or not just transportation to be involved, to overcome these challenges together. So I've been asked to keep it short, to bring this all together and to report out, and I feel that if you have questions, if you want to come and approach any one of us who were involved yesterday, I encourage you to do so. And I'm inspired to create a drone innovators network here in Africa. And I know the World Economic Forum is very much looking forward to supporting you and the LVC moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We really appreciate that report out, and I definitely encourage you, if you are with any questions, please feel free to find Mr. Harrison and speak to him maybe during the lunch break. But moving right along, next we are going to hear a report out from the group that explored different facets related to drone technology. And so to share with us a little bit about that, I would like to introduce once again to the stage the co-founder of SenseFly, Mr. Jean-Christophe Zoufri.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can you please power the slides? So yesterday we had, I believe, a very interesting technology track. What we did is to ask all the drone makers, almost all of the drone makers, because Wing Chua was preparing for the famous BVLOS operation, so they couldn't attend that session. But the four others came up with their birds, put them on the stage, and had a 10-minute presentation that was really oriented towards technology, discussing technology. And we encouraged the audience around the table to ask as many questions as they could, and this worked. So we had really interesting questions. And some of them really found this track interesting because, indeed, an exchange could really happen. So let me quickly summarize here what I believe the technology of the drones, cargo drones, look like nowadays. So first of all, I was really impressed by the fact that all of the 5 drones here are vertical takeoff and landing drones, which was not the case a few years ago. And also this technology, sometimes I had doubts about the fact that it would fly stably. And I think that all the demonstration that occurred here in Mwanza in windy conditions sometimes demonstrated the fact that this technology is now becoming to a mature stage. So it's interesting to see that all of the drones, I based their brain on the Pixhawk open source autopilot, which I believe is a good sign. It's a good thing because basically it's not all those drone makers are not reinventing the core of their drones. They're rather building on top of an existing technology that is already proven and reliable. Some of the teams are really also contributing back to the community. They're also improving the hardware of the autopilot, so that's very interesting. And I think this makes also a big opportunity for, in the future, to interconnect those autopilots to, for example, the UTM systems. So if one does it, then all the others will be able to do it very easily. The drone capacity, payload capacity of those drones were between 1 to up to 6 kilograms, a bit rather 4 kilograms, I would say. With a range of 50 to 100 kilometers. So 50 kilometers is really something that you can keep in mind, is easily reachable even in windy situations. And this is much more, you have to note, than what multi-rotors are capable of with sometimes between 10 and 20 kilometers. Some of those systems have a dropping system. Not all of them have it, but all of them are talking about it. Good to keep in mind. We also had very frank questions about how much the system costs. So the answer is between 15,000 and 75,000 USD. And one company, so that's for now. Of course, this price will evolve. It depends on the business case, etc., etc. So many discussions around that aspect, of course. One company, Rigitech, not to mention it, came up with this 50 cents per kilometer on a basis of 1,000 flights per year. This is quite interesting because it makes it competitive, I believe, with the motorcycle operation. So I think it's a good start, and I encourage the drone company to think more and more in terms not of price of the system, but price of the service, transport price. Most of those drones that you've seen here are multi-purpose. So it means that they can also serve for mapping missions. They can also carry sensors. They can do many things like this. But maybe this also means that they are not completely optimized for some of them for cargo operation. And I would say that most of those systems are between a prototype stage and a start of low volume production. Oops. Okay, so then we discussed the use cases. And I would say that most of the things that we discussed during the event, but also during the session, is about health sector and trying to carry stuff like this. And I think this is a very good opportunity for the less than 2 kilograms. That's a slide that I took from Oriol Lopez's presentation. There is really in the health sector a good business case for transporting low mass goods. And I think this make for a low-hanging fruit business case. However, can you come back 2 slides? Thank you. We also learned that Senegal is looking to start medical product delivery drones, using drones, and there is also many projects, for example, led by Village Reach. So many ideas around the health sector, but I really believe we need more in other sectors to start to see a good business in this area. And it seems that Posta Tanzania, that was around the table yesterday, is also very interesting in larger payload capacity. So maybe in some use cases, 2 kilograms up to 4 kilograms is not enough. Many very interesting questions about, how can we ensure that the maintenance is done? How can we ensure that the spare parts come in the country? Do you need battery swaps at both ends, or can you avoid that? How do you achieve obstacle avoidance? How do you plan the flights? Can you fly under the rain? So many discussions like this were going on. So I really believe that the technology is now there. It is existent. We saw it working. The drones are capable of flying beyond line of sight in a reliable manner. So all of this exists. But I think what we are missing is the real use case. And I think it would be good to spend more time, maybe next edition of this event, to think about to analyze the existing supply chains and to see how the drone can be interfaced to the existing supply chains. So the next step will really be not so much about demonstrating technology, but rather finding the right use cases and start continuous operation. And I'm sure that the technology will co-evolve with these real-life use cases. And last but not least, I would say that I'm sure that Africa is really in Africa, small cargo drone can really achieve a leapfrogging in logistics. Thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, any feedback, please feel free to come to me. As you may know, I'm part of the advisory board of the Lake Victoria Challenge. So if you have any feedback about the event as well, and maybe what we would prepare for next year, don't hesitate to talk to me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We can see it. The groups have done a lot of work. It's quite exciting, actually, to see that not only are we becoming more and more familiar with the technology, but we can see a way forward. I would definitely encourage you to take advantage of the work that they have done. You only got to see a few minutes of what they spent all of yesterday working on. And so I would encourage you to reach out to Mr. Zoufri or others from that group to gain more insights from the work that they've done. But now I would like to introduce the last breakout group, of those who are working on Droneport and infrastructure. The whole day yesterday, so I know that they have done some great work, and I'm very excited to see what they have to share with us. So with that, I would like to introduce to the stage Mr. Andres Ramirez and Mr. Wilson Kagogo.
Okay, so we're here to tell you about what we did yesterday. We had a very eventful day. We are looking for another mic and also the presentation. So if you're looking at your program, you may notice that Greg Lindsay was supposed to give this wrap-up, but unfortunately he couldn't make it. So we're filling in for Greg Lindsay on behalf of Aerial Futures, which was putting together this track. We were very interested in looking at the ground dimension of this drone discussion. So what's happening on the ground? How does it affect people? And how does it connect to existing communities and transportation networks? The precedent for our discussion was, of course, the precedent for the discussion was the Droneport concept that was developed in 2016 by Norman Foster and his team at the Venice Biennial. Our objective was to investigate that further and to try to anchor the concept in a real place, in a context, which is the Lake Victoria region, and to use that, that exploration as a point of departure to develop a framework for what would be the basic principles for a drone port that we could maybe build and operate in the region next year. So, next slide. Oh. So we managed to get a couple of boats, and they were very popular. Our track was very popular, and we had a hard time fitting into the boats, but we managed to secure 2 boats. 30 people joined us, and I have to say it was a remarkably diverse group of people. Can I just see a show of hands, or maybe quickly stand up the people who were in the Droneport track? So we had a very diverse group of people that have all kinds of expertise and experiences. We got on the boat and we took off for Juma Island.
And apologies for those who were left behind. Yes, we did have a good time. We mixed business and pleasure, but we apologize, you know. This is our reception at the Juma Island. You can see that the audience was very excited to see us. The enthusiasm and level of excitement to see this kind of project coming to them. We were received with a very happy community. We got together and we looked at where we are going. Our plan was to just see if this works. There you go. So we docked here and we split into 2 teams. One team went to the schools and health center, and another team went to the market and the trading center to see the life and the business in Juma Island. And then we all converged at the school to look at the potential site. Go ahead. On this one, I would like to show you how the business there is structured. You see that given the economies and the level of means, basically economic means, you have small boats, these are fishermen, you have big boats and bigger boats. And yes, it's not only fish on the island, there's also goat and other things. This is a tool they use to do the fishing. It's a fishing net. It looks familiar in the face of many. And then we split into teams and we went to look at other things.
So we were surprised to see what local building materials were on the island and how people were very resourceful already with the kind of construction techniques and technologies that they're using. And you can see side by side that we identified already there's the use of baked bricks and also cement bricks, as well as some stone and local masonry that is done.
It's important to note here that the idea is to have a drone port that fits within the community and becomes part of the community. It's important that whatever work we do for the community, whichever structure we put in place for the community, sits well with the availability of raw materials, skills that are available with some level of training to them. But we want to use whatever is available to keep it local, to keep it cheap, to keep it to involve the community as much as we can. This is a very important picture for us to keep in mind when we are doing the design and the determination of what we do in terms of putting together a drone port. And then this is not put here to be an excuse. Yes, there was rain. It rained so much, but it was an opportunity somehow because it slowed us down. It made us get invited into homes and start talking to the community and people and get to understand their day-to-day life at a much deeper way than a superficial way of walking through. So our idea got disrupted by rain, but it was for the good cause.
So our group was invited into this fisherman's home, and we took the opportunity while we waited for the rain to die down to ask him questions about how he built his home and where he gets his materials, what his day-to-day life was about. And Ben, luckily, was able to translate a lot of what he was explaining to us, what their energy sources are, and it gave us a lot of insight as to how people on the island get by and what things are important to them. We also were very intrigued by energy sources and how the people on the island power their homes and their activities. And we visited a mill and learned that there's very resourceful use of technology to try to generate energy and create a secondary economic viable practice.
And so, coming from the energy side, we realized that on the island, we knew before we went there, it was not a discovery, that the island is not connected to the grid. Any source of power is off-grid source, and there were a couple of solar panels on the roof, and you saw the milling machine being used both for milling and also for generating some power for the community. But there is a very interesting thing that we observed there as well. You see these telecoms, and they have mobile money. So the level of digital penetration at this island is a bit, beyond any other thing that we've seen. Basically, they're part of a digital transformation, and we should put that in mind as well when we're talking about bringing a Droneport to their community. We shouldn't really think that's so primitive. They are part of a digital transformation, and therefore a drone is to complement this digital transformation process.
So when we walked up to the hill, we visited the clinic, the health clinic, and the school. And this is an area that's already been identified by some of the drone operators that have flown over the island as an ideal destination for the Droneport because of its terrain and height. So we tried to understand some of the other civic buildings that are around that place. The school, for instance, should be the next. The school greeted us very friendly, and we met many of the kids. And this is the site that we were really looking at as the potential place where we can build this Droneport, set back from the sandlot, which is where the school kids play during their breaks.
There's something to note here. This site sits opposite to the playground over here. You have a clinic over here. Then you have a school over here. And then we look at the traffic. When we're looking at this location where we want to put a Droneport, we're looking at the traffic of coming inbound and outbound. And it's very close, this side to the lake and also this side to the lake. And therefore, it sits well in terms of how the traffic flow will be. And it's a little bit, doesn't look like there's anything in this area. Actually, there isn't anything in this area in terms of population and people, and therefore takeoffs and landings in this direction is minimizes risk that would be associated with this kind of operations. So this is an interesting area to investigate further. We looked at it as a potential site for the Droneport.
Yeah, then we came back wet and managed to get together and broke up into groups again and tried to start discussing some of the observations we had from our visit and really boiling down the main principles of what do we really need, what does a Droneport really need. And it was a very difficult conversation because it was enormously expansive, but ultimately we managed to consolidate our thoughts, and you'll hear about them later. So that was the first session before dinner. Then we had another session after dinner. And then we had an even later session, which is a design session, which you'll hear about a little bit later.
All right, that marks the end of our trip. Yes, we enjoyed the trip. It was really insightful. We were able to see a lot of things and put into context where the Droneport will be in the community to be and the needs of the community. You'll hear more about our work after the visit, coming together, brainstorming and putting together strategy and the main guidelines for establishing a Droneport later in another session. We thank you very much. We showed you people that were part of the team at the beginning of our presentation. You're more than welcome to approach us for more details, more information on this. And if you have anything you would contribute to our conversation, you're more than welcome to do so. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Asante sana. I'd like to reiterate, as he said, apologies. It was very fun for those of you who weren't able to join us. But don't feel too bad because the rain was pretty cold. So the boat ride back, we were all shivering a little bit. But that said, it was fun. I think it's very exciting how much work was able to be accomplished by these three groups yesterday. Tumefanya kazi hiyo zote ndani ya siku moja tu. That is quite amazing, really, that we are able to make progress like this in a short period of time. And I can't wait to see what comes from it further. I know we'll get to hear a little bit more about the Droneports in a few sessions. And I can't wait to hear what visions for the future they have in that regard. The idea of it being not just a place for drones, but a place where the community can become part of it as well. But moving along, we now have the privilege of hearing from some insights and experience from the World Food Program. And so I'm actually going to introduce three speakers who are going to form a bit of a panel and present to us together, but I will bring them up one by one. So first, it's my honor to introduce Mr. Riaz Lodi. I'd like to welcome him to the stage. He is the head of supply chain management of the World Food Program in Dar es Salaam. And he's been working with the World Food Program for over 24 years. And including within that time has been the Deputy Country Director for Colombia and Ecuador. So let's tukaribisha. Along with him, I'd like to bring up Mr. Kush Gadia. He is the Business Development Officer for Astral Aerial Solutions, which we'll get to hear about now as well. And he is also the Accountability Manager of the RPS Training Academy. And finally, rounding out our panel, I'd like to welcome again Captain Cliff Sweet, the Aviation Officer and Global Lead for the World Food Program. Karibu-san. And from here, I will let Mr. Lodi begin the presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We have divided this session in three parts. In the first part, I will introduce to you what the World Food Program is doing and what is our interest in drones. And I'll show you a little video after that. And then I'll pass it on to Kush, our commercial partner from Astral Air. He will show you what technology is there in support of the heavy lift drones. And finally, my colleague from headquarters, Cliff, will talk about the regulatory framework and other requirements. So, you know, in the world we are living, it produces enough food for everyone. But still, it's sad to report that there are 821 million people that go to bed every night on an empty stomach. That is 1 in 9. So the World Food Program is the United Nations agency that is working to end hunger, fight food insecurity, and improve nutrition by 2030. While the food security has improved over many years because of the efforts of WFP, our partner organizations, UN agencies, NGOs, and more importantly, the governments, still every year natural and man-made disasters push a lot more people back into food insecurity and poverty. WFP is the organization of the UN system that is entirely funded by voluntary contributions of donors, and we raise annually between $5.5 and $6 billion to fund our activities. Assisting 80 to 90 million people every year worldwide in 71 countries, WFP is the leading humanitarian agency that is working to save lives and change lives. So WFP is the agency with dual mandate, that is humanitarian and development. And we deliver food aid in emergencies, and we work with communities to improve their livelihood through different activities and build their resilience. Of the global development agenda, there are 17 sustainable development goals, and WFP is focusing on 2 of them, which is SDG 2, that is to end hunger by 2030, and SDG 17, that is partnership. So why we did that? Because, well, the food security are mandate, but as a leading humanitarian agency, we realized that this cannot be done, this target cannot be achieved by itself, by one agency or one government. So we support partnerships with other UN agencies, partnership with other NGOs working on other SDGs, and partnership with the government. And while doing so, we build their capacity so that they can support their populations by themselves. And we encourage the private sector to look at the problem and solutions through the SDG lens, because implementation of SDGs is the responsibility of the governments, but we know that they cannot do it alone, as we cannot do it alone, and that's why we encourage everyone to work together through the SDG lens to achieve zero hunger. To give you an idea of WFP operations, in 2017, WFP purchased 3 million tons of food at a value of $1.4 billion, in 101 countries, and we delivered 3.8 million tons of food in 71 countries. And we work with our NGO partners and governments to make sure that the food gets to the final beneficiaries that it was meant for. WFP also uses other delivery modalities, such as cash-based transfers, that helps to mobilize local economies. That means that we give cash in the hands of the needy populations that then buy food in the local shops, sometimes selected by WFP, sometimes in the open market, which helps to mobilize the local economy. On any given day, WFP has nearly 5,000 trucks, 92 planes, to trains, to trucks, to smaller vehicles, and sometimes on elephants and camels and donkeys, and finally people carried on their shoulders to their households. In emergencies, WFP is often the first on the scene, providing emergency assistance in the situation of wars, conflicts, droughts, floods, earthquakes, hurricanes, crop failures, and other types of natural disasters. When the emergency subsides, WFP works with the communities to build back their lives and their livelihoods and build their resilience. And we do that through a development lens so that we maximize on the generous contributions we receive from the donors. WFP is also known as the logistics arm of the entire humanitarian system. In many complex emergencies, WFP is requested to provide logistics service. That includes logistics service by road, warehousing, and more importantly, the air service. So we have a very strong aviation unit based in Rome. We contract aircraft, and at the moment, there are, as we speak, large-scale air delivery operations, including airdrops, are going on around the world. I'll now show you a brief video to give you a visual impression of the WFP's operations, and you'll also have an idea of the need that is there for drones.
Hunger. 1 person in 9 lives with it. Millions die from it, but not even one should have to. Poverty, drought, floods, natural disasters, war and violence, fueling hunger and misery in more places than ever, raising the specter of famine. The World Food Program reaches those farthest behind, reaching 80 million people in 80 countries with life-saving food, fixing the root causes of hunger, fueling economies, nurturing hope and opportunity for a better tomorrow. Because there is enough food in the world for every man, woman, and child. We just need to make sure they get it. The World Food Program, working for a world with zero hunger.
Over the last 2 months, we've been able to feed nearly 2 million people in some of the most difficult terrain on Earth. So now in the recovery phase, the difficult work begins. We're employing porters. We've got over 20,000 porters who are clearing trails, carrying relief goods up into the remote areas of the country.
It is the rainy season now in South Sudan, and most of the country's earth roads are flooded or washed away. A trip that will take 2 days from Juba to Rumbek now takes 7 days. WFP road engineers and logistics staff traveled about 80 kilometers away from the capital, where we had learned that more than 150 trucks were stuck due to the bad road conditions. Trucks transporting about 40 to 45 metric tons of cargo basically sink sometimes as far as 2 meters deep in these parts of the road.
Barabara mbaya. Tumefanya siku 4 hapa na tuko empty bado, sio hizo zenye ziko loaded.
They have spent here 4 days.
The deterioration of the roads has a very huge impact for WFP's work. The food will not get to the location where it is needed. We have thousands and thousands of people in this country who are in desperate and urgent need of food assistance. If we can't get it in a timely nature, then we are putting these people's needs at risk.
All stations, we have a live run.
I hope it gives you an idea of the operations we are handling around the world and the need for drones that is there. The potential is there. We are definitely not planning or thinking about replacing trucks with drones, but not in the foreseeable future at least. But we definitely, you have seen the number of areas where drones can help. I leave it to the drone manufacturers, the drone operators and regulators to see where the drones can help WFP operation. But the idea of this presentation and video was to show you where the potential is. To give you in addition to the presentation, I can give you an idea of the 2017 air operations. WFP delivered about 31,000 tons of food by air, and about 80,000 tons of food was airdropped only in two countries, South Sudan and Syria. So with this, thank you very much for your attention. I'll pass the floor now to my friend and colleague Kush to talk about the drone technologies that's there, and we'll take it from there. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Kush. I'm here representing Astral Aviation and Astral Aerial Solutions. We are an airline and a drone operator as well. So a bit about Astral Aviation, which is the mother company. We've been operating for 18 years out of Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, and one of our biggest routes has been to Mwanza, and we've been operating here for a very long time. We're a national carrier, which is designated by the Ministry of Transport in Kenya. And we have scheduled routes all over East Africa and up into Europe as well. We cover most of Mogadishu, Juba, as well as locations in Tanzania as well. So we have international routes into London, into Belgium as well, and I'll be showing you a route structure as well. So and we have interline agreements with a lot of carriers, and so we do also offer lithium battery shipments as well, just for some of you guys here. Yeah. So this is our route structure. So we cover most of East Africa. We do touch into Yemen as well, into Dubai, and into Europe as well as some of West Africa. So recently, one of our objectives was to jump the curve in aviation, was to remove the crew from the equation and switch to unmanned aviation. So we began to look at this in 2016, and we're happy to announce that we're still here, although we've had some regulatory issues, but our verticals in our business include an ROC, which is an RPAS operating certificate, which would then include your large cargo drone operation, your inspection, agriculture, and whatnot from there. A training academy with our affiliates in South Africa, and a DJI resale and repair center in Kenya. So I'm here today to talk a little bit more about the case for cargo drones, large cargo drones for humanitarian relief. Most of these are already pretty much done by manned aircraft, but we'll see greater savings if it were to be done with unmanned. So that is the goal. We look to do relief cargo, medical vaccines, large blood deliveries, and amongst other food deliveries as well. That's not only the end, it's also commercial services to assist with oil and gas and postal e-commerce for large courier deliveries as well. So you must be interested to know what platform we intend to use, and we've got two options for the heavy lift cargo drones, one being the Falcon F250, which has a 250 kilo maximum payload, a 1500 kilometer range, and it can land on short airstrips as well. I see our friend from safety must be quite worried about this operation, but it will definitely work. So the next solution we have is the Flyox cargo drone, which I'm sure a lot of you might have already known about, but it's got a 4,000 kilo maximum takeoff weight, including the aircraft, with a 1.8 ton payload, a 1,200 kilometer range. And this aircraft is unique. It also looks a bit like a boat as well, and in the future it will be landing in water and taking off as well. So it will be amphibious. So a market comparison, this aircraft falls somewhat in between the Cessna Caravan twin otter size. On an empty payload, you're hitting an endurance of more than 35 hours and in a really long range as well. So obviously the numbers reduce with the more payload and destinations and altitude as well. So I'll give you a bit more about the FlyOx update. The aircraft recently flew in Northern Europe. It did a small pilot project there to test certain scenarios at sea level and such. So they performed 3 successful test flights. They were autonomous takeoff, landing, and partial taxi as well. The takeoff distances achieved were less than 500 meters, and the distance traveled per flight were around 260 kilometers. 0 technical issues were found after each flight, so it was a success, and the very important one, they were operationally capable in 1 hour. This means that you could pretty much, in an emergency crisis, be ready extremely quickly to assist the WFP and other agencies as well. So these are some of the routes they covered in Northern Europe. So you can see there were several holding patterns that were done as well, because this was at an airport. So they did have to work together with manned aviation and work around those operations as well. So these all covered around 260 kilometers and flew over the ocean, both day and night operations as well, and fully autonomous takeoff and landing. So some of the advantages that we see as an airline, first of all, it's cost effective because you're removing the crew, so that's obviously one reduction, but after you also require a reduction in fuel costs because this aircraft actually uses petrol. It uses 2 car engines, so again we see greater operational reductions. Flexibility in flight scheduling is a big one. 1 hour operational capable, so you can, emergency situations, it's well developed for that. Obviously the ability to land in any surface, so again that's landing at a beach. And fewer crew requirements. The crew usually complain a lot. We're used to that as an operator, so might as well keep them on the ground. So I've got a quick video for you guys to show you the aircraft actually flying with a camera on board. It's a quick 2-minute video of takeoff and a landing as well. So I hope today that we've shown you that larger cargo drones are out there. They'll be hitting the market fairly soon, and we will be using them in Kenya and around East Africa as well. So thank you for your time, and I'll just play you a quick video. Just a quick flight over the ocean, and then it'll turn back and come in for a landing. We're in Northern Europe in Norway. That's right. So that was the loud noise of the V8 car engines. They're actually Corvette engines, for those of you who like your cars. And again, this landing is fully autonomous. Bit of a bouncy landing, but a landing nevertheless. There's one bounce, and there we go. Okay, there we go. We have the FlyOx back on the ground, safe for you as well, and I'll pass it on to Cliff from here.
Thank you, Kush, and thank you, Riaz. Do you advance the deck, please? So I think the need is apparent. We're not talking about, excuse me, delivery with 1 kilo. We're talking about what would, by comparison, would be seen as massive lift. This is the Ilyushin aircraft, a Russian aircraft, and Ria's photo or video showed this drop in South Sudan by parachute. We're not looking, obviously, to replace this amount of lift with unmanned aircraft immediately, but we do have a beginning point. So again, Riaz was kind enough to give our footprint, and there it is graphically. And as I mentioned yesterday, we hope in June to be able to add a legend that says RPAS corridors. But how do we get there? I think that's the big question. Our vision and our goal is quite simply to begin air cargo in the highest degree of safety. We will collaborate and coordinate with civil aviation authorities, ICAO, IATA, and other United Nations group, and we hope to develop footprints and operations that can be then lifted and reproduced in other states. So to begin at the beginning, our model using nearly 9,000-pound RPAS is so close to manned aviation, that's where we begin. But as we've heard the term hybrid, but I'm going to stick a little closer to the manned aviation rules because I think we have to transition from there. The UAS toolkit, I was fortunate enough to work with a group at ICAO over about a year and a half, has a lot of guidance for operators and also for civil aviation authorities and industry. So through this, we could see existing regulations, authorization process, and talk about RPAS regulation licensing. But one of the backbones of our work is going to be something called rules of the air. And I've heard it said many times, and this is a fact, that ICAO has no SARPs relative, or the complete set of 19 SARPs, 19 annexes for unmanned aircraft at this point. But we do have very, very strong guidance from ICAO. Annex 2 Rules of the Air, Appendix 4 and Chapter 3 talk about taking great care to avoid other aircraft. The Secretary General provided a state letter last year to all civil aviation, or all member states, all 192 member states, reminding them of their obligations under Annex 2 to keep aircraft or airports, international airports, safe. So there are mechanisms that the civil aviation authorities have in effect today for enforcement and to keep aircraft safe. So we'll be leaning heavily on those. And what are some of the pieces we're going to look at or really rely on? I mentioned yesterday the request for authorization. So this is from the back of the RPAS manual. This is a 4-page form with about a 7-page guidance behind it. That's Doc 10019 if some of you have access to ICAO documents. But if one was to fill out this form in detail, you would actually have a very strong start on an operational risk assessment that the Civil Aviation Authority would require. And also we mentioned yesterday, and Harrison and others have gone through SMS and safety cases, but every piece of this application process will be loaded with mitigation. So at the end of that process, the Civil Aviation Authority or the Air Navigation Service Provider will be able to make a very informed decision on accepting the risk of the operation. So again, obviously the Civil Aviation Authority, the ANSP, needs to know where you're going to fly. This particular piece of airspace is a real unmanned aircraft route. There are They're military training routes, jets coming at 400 knots. I remember once we had to stand down, we had to deconflict real time. They said, you can have the east half of your route till 1100. At about 10:55, I heard a whine and went outside the bunker I was in, saw a NATO tornado jet coming by at about 400 feet. I don't know if it was 400 knots, but it was very fast. So the deconfliction tools exist, and I do want to applaud World Bank for hiring a very knowledgeable person to run their deconfliction here, David. I'm extremely impressed with the real-time deconfliction going on. So that's a basis of a communication and a deconfliction plan that should be part of any application to a civil aviation authority. And we've had some obviously very sophisticated people here discussing UTM, detect and avoid. I don't know that we've gotten, first of all, there is no certified detect and avoid system in the world today. So, you know, we've heard a lot of different components, transponders, ADS-B, first person view, you know, different radar mechanisms, but the complete system does not exist. So we must take caution for other aircraft in the air, avoid them. And how do we do that? The man's on the ground. So that's obviously a very, very important component that we have to consider and line out for the Civil Aviation Authority and the ANSP. The flight plan, again, main components of that. If you're taking off, you would obviously want to tell the ANSP and the CAA, hey, if I lose link, because remember I'm controlling the aircraft from the ground, this is what my aircraft will do. After 30 seconds, it's going to go into a holding pattern, it's going to come home. It's going to go out over the water and hold. Whatever it would do, you need to advise the Civil Aviation Authority. What if it flies away? That could happen. So, you know, you need to know where it is and advise people, the ANSP or others, what's going to happen. So that would be a part of your flight plan. And I mentioned David's deconfliction process here for the Lake Victoria Challenge. We utilize about a 15th generation, this was about 7th generation of a process developed with NASA, a deconfliction plan. If it's kind of fine print, but it begins 7 days out, just distributing operational plans, filing NOTAMs, filing flight plans, and every detail possible. This was an actual search and rescue. I was program manager. I was lucky enough to have a huge Coast Guard cutter, manned aircraft, 2 UAS or 2 unmanned aircraft, rescue swimmer, and the exercise was simulating an air crash crash in the Arctic Ocean. There was a heat signature put in a basket. It was found with infrared aircraft on a search grid. Rescue swimmer went in, retrieved the heat signature and delivered it to the Coast Guard cutter. So WFP has now, as I mentioned, we're about on 15th generation of this deconfliction plan. So when we come to states with our package, this will be the back page, and all these blanks will be filled in with our operations center and whoever we'll be contacting with. Obviously, the Civil Aviation Authority and the state have the purview to layer us up again with more conditions and limitations until they feel the project is at a point that they're ready to accept the risk. Our path forward is, as I see it, fairly straightforward. We're here to enable the highest level of safe humanitarian cargo delivery possible, and we're beginning on a multi-pronged approach. I have not been able to announce our smaller lift, but those are imminent. Hopefully you'll hear about those in the next couple of months, and these are all Pan-African projects. But they'll be managed by the group I work for, WFP Aviation, in collaboration, very close collaboration. We've already come in to civil aviation authorities with ICAO and from the regional office here, working as close as we possibly can with the Civil Aviation Authority and our operator. Again, we are not operators, we are facilitators. And thank you, Kush. As the operator, we have a letter of interest with Astral Aviation for the Flyox manufactured in Barcelona, Spain. I had the pleasure of going over and watching an engine endurance test for a couple of days west of Barcelona. And after touring the facility, watching the engine endurance tests, these are exhaustive tests where they run at a very low RPM, takeoff RPM. It's up and down, up and down, up and down for very long periods of time. And I said to the owner and the manufacturer when I was walking away, I said, you know what I don't like about your aircraft? Because no, Cliff, what? I said, that I can't get in it and fly it. You know, it's a beautiful plane, 300 horsepower engines, but we can fly it remotely. So future collaboration, where are we headed with this? Riaz was provided a very graphic video of the task at hand. We're not just stopping with our launch point of the 1 or 1.5 metric tons. We're actually working with airship entities. This unnamed company is about in year 8 of an airworthiness process in an unnamed state. There's actually 2. This particular aircraft has the capability to lift from a ship with containers and go straight to the field and descend. And this, again, is almost completely through the certification process, expecting 2020. There's a larger unit at 60 tons that is expected in 2022. So we have ongoing conversations with these entities, and again, we are following manned aircraft protocols and working with this ICAO, IATA, and the civil aviation authorities to develop these unmanned aircraft protocols, processes with best practices from around the world. And I'd just like to close with a thank you for you all, especially World Bank and our very, very gracious hosts from Tanzania. Thank you for making me and our team, who are very, very far from home, feel like we're at home. We appreciate it.
All right, and with that, I'd like to thank again all of our presenters right now, but based on all this great experience we've just heard, we don't want to let them go quite yet, and we're going to open up the floor if anyone has any questions for them. We would love to be able to ask our panel a few questions. So if you have a question, raise your hand and I'll bring you the mic.
I just have a question for Kush in terms of the price performance of Flyox and similar systems. Obviously, we think in 2022, 2025, if you think about if Astral Aviation continues on that path, what percentage, first of all, presumably this is going to be cheaper for you, or you wouldn't be doing it. What would the ratio in your business be between manned flights and unmanned flights?
Is it on? Okay, thank you for the question. So what we're looking at is we're looking at around a 40% reduction in operation cost. And we're hoping that as soon as we're allowed to fly international routes, then we see that we'll be using the drones more for longer distance routes across borders. So we're hoping, hopefully by, let's say, 2022, 2024, that, through the CASOA association, that we are able to harmonize all the regulations and such that will allow us to fly drones across borders. So if that will happen, then hopefully by then we'll have more drones and less manned aircraft.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hi, thank you. Has there ever been an environmental impact assessment done on the use of unmanned aircraft versus manned aircraft, specifically with regards to emissions?
So I'm pretty sure the Flyox does not have one. I can tell you in the state I'm from, if you're talking about EIS, I would actually say you're a little off base looking at emissions. There's another consideration. You want to guess what it is on an EIS? In the Arctic, we were surveying marine mammals. So the environmental groups weren't concerned about emissions. They were concerned about noise. So for what that's worth. But this aircraft is very fuel efficient. And, you know, there's most engines will be next-gen engines. I can almost assure you that's not going to be an issue, but we will comply. I mean, not myself, but the manufacturer will comply with every regulation. But remember what I said about in 14 CFR, Part 36 in the United States, sound. And for all of you that are in the drone manufacturing business, just remember that, because in my view, that's where the environmentalists are going to come. Thank you.
Anyone else? Yep.
It's really for Austral Aviation. You probably don't believe this, but I protect the control zones and airports fiercely. I don't let drones near them. However, we've just done that successfully. How far can you water taxi? For example, if you land at the airport here, and then can you taxi on the water to get out of the road of other flights before you take off?
Okay, so for the water taxi, they're currently still training the autopilot to handle all of the water situation, but it'll be done fairly soon. So then we'll be able to test those certain scenarios to get the aircraft out of the way in the water. Yeah.
Maybe anyone on this side of the room? Any more questions? All right.
So just one more thing I want to add to the certification process. So requirements that WFP has. So FLYOX coming to us, they're going to need to have a certificate of airworthiness. They're going to need to have an operator certificate. For those of you that are aircraft operators or airline operators, that's known as an AOC. It's now an ROC and licensed pilots.
All right. One last chance to take advantage of all this experience. All right, let's thank our guests one more time. Thank you very much. All right. And with that, I'm excited to welcome our next guests. Wageni wanaokuja hapa sasa hivi wamefika asubuhi hii tu, but we are very thankful that they were able to make it today. And I think we all have a lot that we were able to learn from them. So they represent the world's first national drone delivery system. It's taking place in Rwanda, Zipline, as I'm sure many of us have heard of. And I'd like to welcome them to the stage to be able to tell us a little bit about what they've learned in the work that they've done so far. So first, I'd like to bring up Mr. Dan Zerwanka. He is the head of global operations at Zipline, and along with him, Mr. Nixon Ndagalagasi, sorry, one of their flight operators, and I'll turn it over to them.
Thank you. Thanks, you guys, for having us. This is awesome to be here, actually, and to see how much interest there is in drone technology in Africa. To see how accepted even the word drone is really cool to me. It had such a negative connotation, you know, even 5 years ago. And so now the fact that people see it as something that's so positive and transformational is really inspiring. We actually have one of our show planes that's a full-scale aircraft. We were going to set up on the stage, but we'll have it available outside later to look at if you guys want to check it out. And can I just start this with the... Anyway, while we're getting the slides up, it's been a kind of an exciting week, and so I wanted to make a couple announcements that are really positive for us and for actually Rwanda too, where we operate. Last week, 3 hospitals in Rwanda announced that they've had 7 months of 0 maternal hemorrhaging fatalities. So to be part of a healthcare system that posts those kind of numbers in Africa is awesome, and we're really humbled and honored to be a part of that. Also, Rwanda and Zipline have now officially entered into an expansion contract where we will be delivering across almost 95% of the country about 1,000 different SKUs, barcodes of medical supplies and critical medicines. So we hope to kind of take the things that we learned and also the things that we like the efficiencies that we gained and lives that we saved, and now expand that to more than just blood products. So that's super excited about that. Oh, that's fine. Thank you. Okay, so I'll just kick into the slides real quick. So my name is Dan Zerwanka. I run global operations for Zipline. I'm also one of our lawyers. I handle most of our international legal work. But I like to try to stay out from behind a desk as much as possible. So, and then my coworker Nixon here is one of our best flight operators. He's also a Tanzanian, so I thought it would be appropriate to invite him along with us. I've clicked through these slides here. So as you can see, in 2016, we were operating from one facility, and we're covering a fair amount of the country, operating to 12 hospitals, and now we're going to be operating from multiple facilities and covering almost the entire country. And as our range expands too, we'll pick up the rest of it. So, one of the distinctions I wanted to make is that, Zipline is like a complete technology service rather than just a technology product. So we see kind of see ourselves as providing a service, and we use drones to provide that service. We also happen to manufacture the drones. Here, this is a video that I'll let Nixon talk through, but it essentially goes through our process.
So as Dan has been explaining, that is the order being placed at our distribution center, and then the full ops packing it, and then that is being loaded on the drone, and then the drone being assembled on the launcher, then the pre-flight checks, and then the drone being launched. Then it will fly autonomously all the way to the hospital. That is about 8-kilometer range. And then when it reaches there, it will come a little bit down, and the hospital will get a notification that the drone is there, and the drone will drop a package, and then it will head back to the facility. So when the package is dropped, the lab tech will go and pick the package, and then heads over to hand it to the doctors that will use the product. Then the drone will head back to our distribution center, and then it will land. Thank you.
So, like I said, we work very closely with Rwanda, and we've been able to save many lives, and we've completely eliminated the expiration of blood products, which is a big deal, but we've also equalized access to all of the medical products that we deliver, to all the facilities that we deliver. So, instead of one facility ordering things and maybe hoarding them, and then they expire, at the expense of other facilities having access to those products, we now can keep them centralized, and then everyone has equal access to them, and we can deliver them on demand. So 30 minutes to an hour, pretty much anywhere we deliver. And obviously, the next step now that we just are going to be delivering a lot more products, it's kind of like a new chapter in our relationship with Rwanda too. So there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes that you don't necessarily see. That are pretty heavy tasks to undertake. This was our operations circa 2016. And I put a lot of photos in here too, just to try to make it less technical and like a little bit more interesting for you guys. You can see we used to use inflatable mats that would catch our aircraft when they landed. And we operated out of very small medical warehouse. And these are our previous generation aircraft. Our new systems, this is our new facility with a proper medical warehouse, the latest generation of our aircraft. And a lot of the things about this aircraft, the big wins you don't necessarily see on the outside. It is a larger aircraft, it flies faster, it carries more, but it also has a lot of engineering advancements in it. For example, the old aircraft used to use, I think, 56 different types of fasteners. The new aircraft uses 3 types of fasteners, 2 of which are just different lengths. So it makes it a lot faster to assemble. All the parts on it are all modular. We call them LRUs, which is a line replaceable unit, so that if any piece breaks, it's easily and quickly replaceable. You could see on our model aircraft, the 3 top level LRUs that we have are a battery, a wing, and a fuselage. And in our old version, the aircraft, if it crashed, the whole aircraft would be out of service if you were just repairing a tail or a wing. The new aircraft, you just unscrew a couple of screws, slide it off, and put a new one back on. If a wing needs repair, you just throw another wing on the fuse and it can still fly. So, and also the build time is drastically reduced. So there's a lot of things under the hood that we've listened to customer feedback on and have tried to really reduce costs and also increase our ability to scale. This is a kind of interesting image here. What I wanted to say is that we collect a lot of valuable data and we've learned a lot of engineering lessons working at really high volume scale, on a national level, that I just don't, I think that you can't really learn without doing, that's one of those things where you just have to fail a lot and you have to have a lot of flight time and a lot of hours to figure out what needs to be fixed and what you can improve. This image here is actually our highway in the sky for one of our delivery routes. And there's 3 lines on each side, kind of like highway lanes. But what's really interesting about this is this actually represents the paths of 200 flights. So the aircraft are almost exactly on track every single step of the way. And the little variations that you see are actually high winds coming from the mountain. So I think I kind of nerd out on that stuff. I think that's a really interesting image. Anyway, so the point of this was to talk about the lessons that we've learned over the last 2 years operating, the first commercial drone delivery service at national scale. And I really wanted to try to come up with some lessons that I think could be applicable to all of you guys, especially that, you guys that are building UAVs or autonomous aircraft or working in any other drone space like traffic management. And so the first lesson that I wanted to say is that power equals responsibility. If you have the power to make a difference, I think you also have a responsibility to make a difference. And I can't tell you, one of the reasons I work at Zipline is because I hear stories all the time of these emergency deliveries that we've made. And I think a third of our deliveries, maybe 9,000 or 10,000 deliveries now, are emergency deliveries, and those are life-saving deliveries. The other ones that we do are resupply deliveries, where we're just managing stock levels in real time. But the emergency ones are the ones that really get me, and it's the reason why I joined Zipline. And so anyway, I want to share 2 of these stories with you real quick. Oops.
ngombwa ko amaraso yanshizemo arayanyohereza ababishinzwe ndabona amaraso kumva naritabye Imana ko ari yagize umuntu
iyo nabona ayo maraso nari gushobora gupfa igihe kuva basaba amaraso n'igihe yatugereyeho nta minota 5 irimo.
So, these are just 2 stories of patients that we've delivered blood to. And actually Alice, sometime after her treatment, I think we delivered maybe 12 units of blood and 3 units of plasma and a couple units of platelets. She kept bleeding, and we just kept sending more aircraft and delivering. And when she came to the facility, maybe 5 or 6 months after she had healed up, she brought her whole family, and she said, thank you. It saved my life, but you also saved my family too. My husband still has a wife. My children still have a mother. And like, that's the stuff that really, it still gets me. I mean, I've been working here for like almost 2 years, and it's like hearing it for the first time every time. But all these outcomes, they're not just a piece of magic hardware, right? A lot of smart and hardworking people around the world are working like 24/7 all the time, putting all their skills and abilities into the service of something that's greater than themselves. And everyone at Zipline feels that way, and that's why I'm proud to work there. Drones are all the rage right now, but the vehicle really is just the tip of the iceberg. This is Blaze, he's one of our fulfillment operators. It takes a massive amount of like behind-the-scenes hard work to create new systems, but also to manage and navigate the intricacies of different health systems. It's not like in the US working in different states. Like, yeah, there's variations in state laws, but like in Africa in particular, every country is a sovereign entity with their own bodies of laws and their own ways of doing things. And so to figure out a way that you can best work with them will be extremely important, but it's also going to take a lot of work. And it's worthwhile work. So I guess I would say I would urge all of you to use your abilities to the fullest, and try to leave the world a little better than you found it. So this kind of shows you, like, this is just a graphic showing how we have to interface with the MOH, the Ministry of Health, and the Civil Aviation Authority on a daily basis. We report all kinds of data and statistics, and those systems alone are massive undertakings. So again, just don't neglect all the stuff that happens behind the scenes, because it might save somebody's life. The second lesson I wanted to say is that knowledge, it has to be shared. If you have a technical knowledge that can benefit humanity, we believe that you have a responsibility to transfer that knowledge for the benefit of all humanity. So at Zipline, this is one of our production facilities, but we hire and train local workers 100% in the countries that we operate in, and that's both for technical and non-technical, like facility positions. This is an image from one of the trainings that we do regularly in our Muhanga facility. And we actually have daily, like, seamless collaboration between engineers in the US and our flight and fulfillment operators here in Rwanda. And when we all learn from each other, your knowledge increases a lot faster, right? And so we're also really extremely proud to share this technology. And we've learned a lot about drones and both healthcare logistics. And so we want to spread that knowledge with every new team that we work with, so that their next generation can learn and take what we've taught them to the next level even. The third lesson is it's not about the drone. And I know, like, our engineers will probably yell at me for saying this, but in my opinion, hardware alone doesn't matter. It's what you do with that hardware that matters, right? So do the hard work to figure out what kind of, I think someone said earlier, use cases that you can, be a benefit to, or what kind of problems you can solve. This is, some hardware testing. It's really cool. We have really cool motors and all this stuff, but we have a whole team that's also always looking for new ways to use what we do to solve really difficult problems. And again, this is us before, and this is us now. And I would say it's really an exciting time for all of us in the drone space, and that's why I'm really stoked to be here today. At Zipline, we see the vast potential for good that drones present, and we're all working really hard to advance that technology. And I'll just show you an example of some of the areas that we focus on. So we're focused in the healthcare space, as you guys have seen. And we really try hard to have guaranteed cold chain logistics, which means not just delivering things that need to be refrigerated, but also managing those things and stocking them like always within, you know, the best limits of temperature ranges, making sure all of our stuff is calibrated. A lot of facilities way out in the, you know, rural areas don't have the ability, even if they have refrigeration units, to keep them calibrated properly. And so, you know, we make sure that we do that. We also try to like make inventory management a lot smarter, so that you can hold less on hand and have more access to for everyone. And then emergency response, that's a big one. We always want to be available for emergencies, and so we'll be getting resupply orders all day long, but those always take a back seat if an emergency order comes in. Everybody stops what they're doing, and we make sure that goes out first. And then chronic care management. This is, you know, kind of one of those things where the new products that we'll be delivering will start to help a lot. And some of our solutions, you know, we really try to offer improved access. System-wide cost reductions is a big one, and decentralizing and specializing primary care. And then there's also an impact on health workers. I've talked to a lot of people, not just in Rwanda, but in many countries, that they feel like they can't give their patients the best care that, you know, that they would want to. And when I talk to people that work at hospitals or health facilities that we deliver to, they have a little bit more hope, or like they feel like they can actually take better care of their patients because they can get blood, you know, right when they need it. So these are some of the problems that we faced early on, and we'll still face for a while. Stockouts are certainly the norm. Ground transportation is unreliable, especially, as you guys know, in rainy seasons, and maintaining vehicles as well, or even, you know, getting an ambulance to go pick up supplies and then bring them back to a hospital. And then, of course, you know, projecting what your demand is very difficult, and so, you know, you never want to stockpile stuff like this and have it expire. And also, you know, these are cold chain reliability problems that are really important to solve. And then I would say the last lesson would be just listen to your customer, or in a lot of our cases, potential customers, right? I mean, this is a new industry. We're all looking for customers. Like, we have some customers. I think we have like 14 countries and 3 continents in the pipeline now. But, you know, it remains to be seen exactly what we'll be, you know, providing for all of them. It's all going to vary. And so it's important to listen to what your customer needs, and not just say, hey, I got this awesome thing. Hey, look at my cool drone, like figure out something to do with it. It's like, you know, take the next step and figure out what it is that you need to do to solve a problem for them with your awesome technology. And then I just want to kind of give a shout out to Rwanda specifically, because they were the first country to believe in us. And so we'll always have a special relationship with Rwanda. And personally, for me, the people of Rwanda as well. They've taught us that our customers really are also partners. You can't just, you know, sell something to someone like that's this detailed and be like, don't ask me any questions, or don't tell me what to do. You know, it's totally a partnership, and you're going to talk to them every single day. So make the most of that partnership. Listen to what they need, and find new ways to integrate into their supply chains, into their logistics systems, into their regulatory frameworks. And to the extent that you can provide suggestions about how to improve, you know, say regulatory frameworks, do that, because it's going to be good for everyone, including them. And then so I just want to finish by saying that, you know, this is an exciting new industry for all of us, and the best path forward, it's not clearly defined, but the opportunities for aviation technologies to positively impact society are very many, and I really hope that Zipline is just one of a whole new wave of startups that could reshape our understanding of what drones can do for the world. It's been a long time, especially in the US, that the FAA has had any interest in really innovating in aviation regulations and aviation law. It's almost like the golden age of the airplane way back in the day. And so, you know, we're all a part of it to some extent. So recognizing that, and like, I would say enjoying the ride and also having fun. Like, don't forget to have fun. Like, drones are cool. I don't know about you, but like, I've been playing with like RC airplanes since I was a kid, and like I crashed them so much. But now I get to work for a company that uses that an evolution of that technology to save people's lives, and I think that's awesome. But it's hard work, and you'll get stressed out and frustrated. But remember to have fun and laugh with the people you work with once in a while. And that's it for me, and then I'll open it up for questions. And I actually wouldn't mind if you guys don't mind, if we have time, like just hearing a little bit about some of the lessons that Nixon has learned on the ground. Cool.
Nixon.
Hi, everybody, again. I just wanted to thank everybody for having us here. We are excited. Us at Zipline, we're excited with the technology, and we're excited to learn about other players in the industry. Welcome and have a chat with us, ask us questions, and we can also provide the experience on our side, and also can share some knowledge that we have. Thank you. We'll be happy to take a couple of questions from you guys if you have any.
Sorry?
If there's a question.
Yep. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause one more time. Very exciting to hear that so many of these things we've been speaking about the last few days, they're doing them right now in Rwanda. So it's very exciting, and I hope to hear more about how they can help us here at Lake Victoria Challenge. With that, let's open up the floor to questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. And this time, if you ask a question, can you please stand so the cameras can see you? Yep, over here.
Thanks. When you were starting this journey with the Rwandan government, how did that talk begin? Because I know there's a lot of governments here very interested in expanding what's possible. So could you speak a little bit about how that started, how you engaged them, and what was maybe the first thing that was the most helpful in getting those discussions started? Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I'm probably not the best person to answer that question. That was right before I arrived at Zipline. But I know that our CEO and our CTO, we're traveling in Africa, and I should let them tell this story even because I don't fully know it. But yeah, they saw a real need with faster blood delivery to some rural hospitals, and they were like, man, what if we made a drone that could do that? So then that's where they came up with the idea, and then I guess they had started making some contacts with the Rwandan government, and as you know, Rwanda is very kind of tech forward, and so they were the first ones that were open to giving it a try. It's a hard sell, right? I mean, to say, hey, we have this new technology that no one's ever tried before, and it's not proven and it's not tested. Do you guys want to take a risk on it? Because the people that make the decisions, like, all the risk falls on them, right? And then if it succeeds, then kind of everyone shares the glory, I guess, or the win. So I don't know to answer your question. I don't know, but I know that people in the government were receptive to trying something new, and that's how we got started.
That's why I'm getting.
First of all, I want to congratulate you on the beautiful mission that you have in Rwanda. As a Drones for Good manufacturer from the Netherlands myself, you are a great inspiration to us. I was wondering if you, with your technology, you use the drop system, if you're also thinking about going into reverse logistics in the future, if picking up blood samples, for instance.
Yeah, so we get asked that a lot, and I can't really answer anything officially, but I will say that we're on our 6th generation of aircraft already in like 3.5 years, so we've got a lot in store. Reverse logistics is certainly something that is asked for a lot. We thought that from a business perspective, the type of aircraft that we designed is designed for a certain type of mission, right? It's a long-range delivery, which is different than like a multi-copter, which certainly had their place too. But in the type of environments that we were operating in, where it could be raining really hard, it could be extremely windy, and we need to get 80 or 100 kilometers away, we went with a fixed-wing aircraft and a parachute system, because also then we don't have to have any infrastructure at the facilities, especially being very remote facilities. They don't need to maintain or some kind of other equipment to either retrieve the package or not have any equipment and then have them interact with the aircraft and maybe get cut by propeller or something. So it made the most sense for what we were trying to do. And then we knew that we would also learn a lot of lessons in this process. And so again, like the stuff I was talking about before, the stuff under the hood that you don't see, the software engineering stuff, our software engineers, it's crazy. I'm literally like the dumbest guy at this company. It's like everybody from SpaceX and NASA and Google and Apple and Tesla, and they're developing the software, which in my opinion is the most important piece, because at the volumes that we're scaling to manage 2,000 to 3,000 aircraft in the sky at any one time is a big undertaking in itself, right? And so we have a whole software team that's doing that. And then, we have engineering teams that are we call them cycle testing, but they build machines that actually just move all the parts until they break and figure out what their brake cycles are and collect all that kind of data, So in my opinion, it's the stuff that you learn in that process that then allows you to iterate really quickly that's most valuable, and that's the decision that we made.
Huh?
Just to add on what Dan has said, also one of the challenges, we understand there is a lot of need that we have to address, but also in the same fields that we are doing, the same things that we are doing, we still have a lot of challenges. So part of our team is trying to focus on exploring the future. As you see, 2 years ago, we did not have the type of aircraft we had. We were not able to cover the mileage that we cover now. So half of the team is working hard in solving the challenges that we're facing now, weather and kind of things, but also the other half of the team is trying to explore the future.
I want to know, how successful have you been in imparting the knowledge to the locals?
Thank you for that question. And as Dan has been explaining, Zipline is very diverse. Operations, for example, in Rwanda are run 100% by Rwandese and African locals. And I am part of the team in Rwanda as flight operator. And I can tell you that within 2 years, there is a substantial group of locals that are getting the knowledge. And this does not end only in the operation side. The locals that are getting trained, they have any chances of getting more trained into more complicated systems as time goes up. So it is not an easy journey, but Zipline is trying hard to reach out there. Thank you.
And I just want to add something onto that too. And I don't know if I'll get in trouble for saying this, but our local staff are amazing. They are so driven and so motivated. It's hard to find people to join our team in the U.S. that have the level of drive that the people in Africa do, and that's been so inspiring to me. So, like I said in the slideshow, we really want to make a point to transfer this knowledge so that future generations can benefit from it. And I really am proud to say that I know that the team that we're building across Africa is going to make the next generation even more amazing.
Okay. As you explained, it's a lot more than the drone. It's the logistics, it's everything that goes around it, it's the relationships. Is Zipline considering at all integrating other aircraft, so other manufacturers' drones into your supply chain?
I mean, I would say never, but I know that we spent a lot of time developing the aircraft and the systems that we use because we just found a lot of reliability issues at high volume when we tested a lot of other like flight controllers and aircraft and things like that. But we're always open to being like proven wrong. Like if there's a better aircraft or something that's better, then like absolutely we'd be happy to explore it. But that really you have to talk to our CTO about that.
Thanks. I have a question about the future. You talked about moving to 1,000 different SKUs. And so is the vision to have routine resupply all products at all facility, emergency resupply for some products to all facility, and if you have any sense of the percentage of inventory throughput that's being moved by drone now or in the future compared to other fleet?
So the first part was, how would we decide, or would we decide about having what products to have emergency or resupplies? Was that the first part?
Or emergency products to all facilities?
Oh, okay. So, I mean, we're starting with like what we call them like critical medical supplies, but you could think of them as emergency products for sure, because again, that's the the most needed first, and then as we expand, we can add things that aren't like necessarily like emergency, but are something that maybe someone gets needs their Humera delivered once a month or something. Or whatever, and that's not necessarily like an emergency, but if you live out in a rural area, it's really hard to get, right? But also, a lot of these decisions are made by our customers too, and so they kind of tell us what they want to deliver first. I don't know if that helps, but we'll certainly deliver whatever needs to be delivered. And then the second part of your question was, what was the second part of your question?
Drone versus other types of fleet?
Oh, sure. So I actually don't know the percentages on that stuff, and I don't really work in that area. We have a whole like fulfillments team that would know those answers. I want to say we're delivering right now like 20% of the blood supply in Rwanda outside of Kigali, right? And that's from one facility. So I'm not sure what the percentage is going to go up to. I haven't slept in a bed in 3 days. I've been on planes, so I could probably get you those answers if you want to send me an email. I always hate when people don't have answers and they don't have a way to follow up. So if anybody wants to follow up with me, it's just dan@flyzipline.com.
All right, great stuff. I know after this, again, as he said, go pepper them with more questions, but as well, they have one of their drones with them that they would love to show, lakini muda ni mfupi sasa. Kwa hiyo ukienda baada ya tumemaliza hapa, ukienda huko chini na expo, if you go to the expo, you can take a look at their drone there, and they would love to show it off to you a little bit. All right, so we have reached our last talk of the morning, and we're going to get to hear a little bit more about Droneports and the vision of what they could be. We got a little bit of a preview of this before, but sasa tutaendelea. So I would like to first welcome to the stage from Georgia Institute of Technology, Daniela Marquez and Joel Jasu. They're going to tell us a little bit about the vision they have, along with, I would like to welcome to the stage once again, Mr. Jonathan Ledgard. Karibuni sana.
Where's Joel? There he is. Yeah, too bad. I'm just going to briefly introduce Joel and Daniela, both architecture graduate students at Georgia Tech. I've appointed them to run through the work that we did in our Droneport group. I think if I put my old economist hat on, I think what is absolutely critical, if this technology develops, is that communities get to benefit from it economically, and not just that value goes upstream to Shenzhen or Silicon Valley. So in other words, that a Droneport might deserve to be slightly messier than one would expect it to be, but obviously safe and secure. I think right now it's best to let Joel and Daniela run through the work we did, and then I might probe them with a couple of questions and hope that the audience would do that as well. Thanks.
Good morning. Wow, it's been a tough morning, right? My name is Joel Jesu. I grew up on the other side of the lake in Kampala, and I've been in the field of architecture now for about 7 years. And so very delighted to be here and just be a part of this initiative that I personally believe will set us up to kind of begin talking about certain things that would fundamentally change how African communities actually will work. And my colleague.
I'm Daniela Marquez. I have been in the field of design and architecture for the last 6 to 7 years. And I've also been very interested in what it can do and impact, and how it can impact communities such as today. Do we have that?
I'd like to thank the hosts here in Tanzania. This is my first time to be in Tanzania, and I tell you, I feel like I'm home. The hosts have been so gracious and so attentive to us, and I'm very, very thankful to all of you. I'd also love to thank Area Futures. They've done such a fundamental job to get this kind of workshop going, and I'm very, very delighted to be part of that team. I'm also very thankful for the infrastructure team. If you guys can just take a minute and stand up if you're in the infrastructure team that worked so hard yesterday, the whole day. Can you all please stand up, please? Thank you. And just so you know, we stayed up until 4 a.m. this morning, again, trying to reinforce these ideas so that we can hopefully deliver some good conversation to spark some questions. Well, while the technology is loading, I'd love to start by saying when we talk about Droneports, I think we can spend a lot of time talking about the logistics, the technology, what kind of drone, what kind of problems it's going to solve. But I also think from a design standpoint and from an architecture standpoint that we stand at the hallmark here in this room to set up a new typology of civic places in Africa, right? And I'll give you an example. As a community, growing up in an African community, I did not experience what it meant to be in a civic place. In fact, the most common gathering place was when you went and played football with your friends, right? That was their community space. The other community space would be a school, right? And so if you had a community meeting, you went to a primary school or a secondary school. The other community place that I think could be really close is a church, right? And so you went to a church and had either community meeting or a worship gathering. But I also do think that the Droneport itself could really be a good way for us to think about community spaces and a new typology that would help communities come together and create a new civic space. It was working in a minute. So, what is a Droneport, right? In our workshop yesterday, we discovered some new things. And when all of you were coming to Mwanza, you did not tell or book your airline ticket or your bus ticket and said, I'm going to a building at Malaika, right? You said you're going to Mwanza. So Mwanza is a place. Mwanza is not a building. Mwanza is not a street. Mwanza is a place. And because it's a place, it carries the weight and why Mwanza is special, right? And so we think that a Droneport is not an object, right? And for all our discussions that we've seen is that the Droneport is this thing where drones go and land and you have all your logistics solved, right? So a Droneport is not an object. A Droneport is also not a building, right? And I would challenge us this morning to think about a Droneport as a place. Because the moment it becomes a place, then it becomes a place where people go to, it becomes a civic place, it becomes a place where people in the community actually look forward to go and see this new technology. In fact, for that matter, it is something that now the community begins to embrace, not as some man's invention, but as something that has really come to be realized from a grassroots effort and from a real place that they live in. So what are some of the core values for a Droneport? In fact, yesterday we came to some sort of debate about whether the word Droneport is the most appropriate thing to actually describe these things that we are talking about. In fact, I think we are talking about a bigger conversation about what we want to create in the 21st century for an African community more than we are actually talking about a Droneport itself. And so I would encourage us this morning to actually challenge that theory of calling it a Droneport, because then we are going to narrow it down to an object or a building. So it must be super local. Yesterday when we went to the island, we were able to observe local materials. But most importantly, when it comes to it being local, it must be something that is designed and informed by the people who are going to use it. And I tell you, I've had an opportunity to work on projects between the United States and Uganda for about 7 years now. And I tell you, I cannot tell you how many projects we've done. And as soon as you get on the plane, you went with your project, right? And then you come back 1 year later, and there's nothing that has happened to whatever you spend a lot of energy and money doing. And the secret is that as individuals sitting in this room, we must learn the art of empathy. Empathy, to me, is the most important thing that we are going to use to design these places for people here in Africa. Because when we engage empathy, and then we begin to find people where they are and be quick to not solve problems, but be quick to engage them and seek ideas and thoughts from them to change their own communities. It must be able to have low carbon emissions. So when it comes to absorbing energy and creating energy, it must be something that produces its own energy, and that energy being clean energy. It must be flexible. Over time, for anything to have an impact, it must be flexible. It's going to change. It's going to evolve differently. People are going to take on the skills that you teach them during the prototyping phase, and they're going to transform those skills to make their own ways of construction. And so it's going to change. It's going to be something that is ever evolving. And it must be civic. I shared a little bit about that it must be a place where we look forward to go. It cannot be an object. I cannot stress that enough, because it just can't be an object or a building. And it must be something that is iconic. one of the things that I really love about the Norman Foster image, it is something that is iconic, right? It is something that the community will be proud of. It's a place that people will go and tell stories. In fact, I look forward to people and a boat route being created here in Mwanza to go to Juma, because there is such an iconic place in Juma Island that will bring people from all over the world to experience the impact of that place. So it must be iconic. It must be something that when you fly over Juma Islands at night, you can see the light beaconing out of this small island that no one actually knows.
So getting a little bit to more, what is the program of a Droneport? Right now, we have established that Droneport in its name says that it has to involve drones, but we've also touched a lot more on what it can be than that. So we have come up with 2 core programming ideas, the main one being a drone core as a volumetric thing, and a civic space as a volumetric thing. You can't have one without the other when you create a drone port for it to be successful. Let's see. Okay. Oh. Yeah, I can just, yeah, we can go back. Yeah, sorry. Okay, no worries. So kind of thinking about this program, we established that a civic space alone could bring interest, kind of what Joel has been saying, to the community when it has not been established yet. But a drone port in combination with it can bring a lot of new opportunities, both in terms of economic growth. It could bring new opportunities in terms of services available, community involvement, but also expanding the local infrastructure to a more regional infrastructure. So when we look at more a little bit at the diagrams that we have explored, you'll see that we're exploring a lot of this in really abstract terms, something that does not have a very defined shape, of not very defined design, intentionally, because that cannot be found until we explore it with the local communities. This is a typology and a framework that could be used anywhere, and then defined and refined based on where it is. So this framework could work as easily on Juma, as it could work in Mwanza, as it could work in Ukerewe, as it could work in any other region of Lake Victoria, when applied with the local concepts that we have been exploring. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. What's the next one? Okay. That's okay. Yeah. Yeah.
We'll just make some simple points while the slides are going on. I think I'm going to make sort of controversial. A big shout out to Zipline. I think it's amazing what you guys have achieved, taking that vision. And I actually think the Zipline model has a lot of validity for the global emergency health delivery space. I'm not sure it has as much validity for commercial cargo in the African context, in terms of smaller communities being able to exchange goods and services, which we probably can't even imagine what they are. When I originally started thinking about these things, I was thinking about red lines for medical and blue lines for cargo.
So I think when we talk about the typology of what a drone port is, we're essentially talking about a kind of blue cargo commercial line. In terms of just to be a little bit specific about what we imagine for Lake Victoria and where we're going with the challenge, I think next year we want to see about building a relatively large structure in or approximate to Mwanza, which has a digital fabrication unit in it, and different drone teams will come and fly in segregated airspace. And then we can imagine an Ukerewe Island, a sort of medium-scale drone port, which also has some digital fabrication. And then what we imagine on Juma is the sort of end game drone port. But really interestingly there in the community, we can already see some potential business models, assuming, of course, which is an enormous assumption, that propulsion systems of drones really do improve. My personal view is that we need to get to minimum 8-kilo payloads, and obviously all of the safety and security that government requires. If we did that, even for Juma Island, which is a relatively poor community, you can imagine that fish products can be semi-processed on the island and flown back to Mwanza with a lot of value being withheld within the community, value which is lost at the moment. And Africa is the sort of king of the middleman business, where a middleman businessman exerts a high degree of arbitrage over relatively poor people who are producing primary products. And I do think that cargo drones and drone ports, if they do massively scale, will actually cut some of the middleman's economic space out. Are we ready with the slides yet? No? It's problematic. Maybe I'll just interview Joel and Daniela. If someone gives me a microphone. Can you just run us through what you think the essential points of the typology of a drone port should be, and why you think it should be a drone port and not a warehouse?
I definitely think that the civic element of the drone port, to me, is the most fundamental thing about the drone port. Because if it's a place that the community feels like they can go, if it's a place that they feel has a civic presence, then it's something that will support any other service that will go into the drone port.
Can we imagine what the drone port in Juma might look like when we build it next year?
So in our discussions and our breakout group yesterday, we talked a lot about what could make the Juma drone port unique to Juma, and a lot of things that we observed were kind of the existing day-to-day living. That's something we talked about with Ben, that there's a very important fishing culture and community established. So the drone port in Juma, to be unique to Juma, would have to incorporate some sort of element in regard to that sort of fishing culture, whether it be an introduction to a weighing station for their fish, for them potentially in the future when the drone ports or the drones themselves can carry larger quantities of weight to then, ferry over through the drones to Mwanza in the fishing market. So.
I think it's important also to think about the drone port having this digital fabrication element. So you have those three functions of safe, secure drone operations, digital fabrication, which is essentially a garage. If you think about early petrol stations, you filled up and your car is repaired there, and then the community element. I'm really hoping these slides are going to work now. Are they? They're okay? Thanks. Thanks so much.
So as kind of what we were talking about, the Droneport requirements, one of the main ones was a secure landing, and this is something that we would have to work in collaboration with all of the people talking here about their drone designs and the manufacturing process. But also this would also be established by kind of the authorities and policies established around the idea of drone aviation around the island and around the region. It would have to function for the operations of drones. So what would that mean? That would mean the drone has to be able to land and take off. It has to be able to be potentially stored. Batteries would have to be recharged. What happens if there is an emergency weather situation? Is there enough available room to kind of take refuge in the drone port? We'd also be looking at then at parking. Would it be something that only happens in emergencies, or would there be a permanent 5 or 10 drones housed in the Juma Island location, for instance, versus a larger island where it could be 10 to 15? And then maintenance. So what happens when these drones will need maintenance? Is there some facility available at the drone port that could offer these services without having to figure out how to get them back to a potentially larger drone port of Mwanza? And then fabrication. Would the people of the islands potentially be able to fabricate their own repairs? We talked a lot about 3D printing and the sort of technology that could be embedded, kind of you know, a makerspace to say, that could maybe start really low tech and then expand to larger, more complex technologies like we've heard about plasma cutting, laser cutting, 3D printing, and 3D digital software. And then energy. This has to have a component of energy. If you are to charge all these batteries, if you are to run all these fabrication equipment, there has to be a level of clean energy. Right now, the only energy source that we saw on the island, since it's off the grid, is solar energy. But what other methods could there be opportunities for to create the energy that would be required to run a drone port? And then connectivity. So that means radio signal. The drone ports must be connected because a lot of the drones that we've been hearing about are based on signal. So there has to be a level of dispatch, but also retrieval of the drones that is embedded. So that maybe might mean a tower. We don't know. That could be expanded upon with the conversation of what would these drones really need moving forward. And then last but not least, this needs to have a level of visibility within the community. Inserting a drone port without allowing the community to really understand how it works, what it does, is very difficult to then create a lasting impact or even an interest of how to attain the knowledge to operate some of these drones locally. So a level of visibility while maintaining a safe perimeter is really important, and we'll touch a little bit more on how we could accomplish that through materiality. As far as for our civic space, we thought it was really important that it starts off being women-centric. Joel can touch a little bit more on this as to why it's so key to do that in the region.
See, as a young child, when I lost my dad, I was raised by a single mom. And one of the things that I came to realize that the anchor of any African community lies within the hands of women and children. And in fact, just to put this in context, yesterday when we went to Juma Islands, there was no teacher that we met at the only primary school on Juma Island. In fact, we asked, where are the women? And said, no, we do not have any women's staff at the school. That says a million words about the power of what this civic place, if it's very intentional to target the core part of the community, and that of the children and the women, how successful that can be. And so I think that's something that we need to leverage and get the women on board and get the children on board. In fact, one way to test the success of a drone port is if you have a football pitch that is well leveled with good grass, and right next to it have a very well-designed drone port, and see how many people go to either. That's one way to test the success of a drone port in an African community, right? Thank you.
So besides being women-centric, there are some other elements we were looking at, including luminosity. This level of illumination, we talked about the idea of, can Juma Island glow at night? Would that be something that you could see maybe from Mwanza, this idea of a drone port that leverages its beaconness in a community through light, not just through the daytime, but through the nighttime, where a lot of these rural communities might not have the power to illuminate their own households, and it can become then a meeting place in the evening time. It must also be a catalyst. So a catalyst in terms of innovating all these new economic growth models that we kind of been hearing about that this could create, but also just opportunities like we were talking about with leveraging women in the community, leveraging the knowledge of the youth, all these things. It could really become a catalyst in a sense. It could also be an incubator of new ideas. What has not been explored could be potentially explored at the Droneport. If anything, it should be encouraged to be an incubator of new ideas that maybe just haven't reached the community yet, or maybe someone in the community is looking to expand upon. And talking about safety, the civic space should be a space where the community feels safe and comfortable enough to be spending time there, invest the time and energy to really make it their own. But it's somewhere that they could seek safety as a term in a more wholesome way. And then again, comfort. We want the community to feel comfortable here. Drones, to many, as we have heard, are still kind of new and foreign, and establishing a level of comfort could introduce that interest in the skill learning, interest in how they're operating, and then maybe expanding the whole economic model further. Yeah.
Lastly, and one of the requirements for a civic space is a very clear understanding of and studying the part in terms of the whole. And up to this far, we've looked at the location of the Droneport as one small trading center. But I'll challenge all of us to think about Juma Island as the site. Because when we begin to engage that terminology in that scale, then we begin to understand what impact it could potentially have on an island as a whole. One of the most interesting and most powerful civic places in the world have very particular locations in a sense of where they are located. When you go to New York City, the Central Park is clearly located in a precise location for a very particular purpose. When you visit cities in Europe where the cathedral is located and the town hall are precisely located to have a very specific impact, right? And so to me, that's something that any team that will get into the Lake Victoria Challenge should be challenged to really study the island as a whole and not just understand it from a trading center standpoint.
So as we talked a little bit about comfort, this idea of the Droneport offering actual shelter in terms of a very simple, just the idea of something overhead to make people feel safe, feel comfortable. Maybe as we got caught in the rain yesterday, we were offered shelter into many of these locals' homes, and it was a wonderful experience. What if this could allow for that moment of interconnectivity within the community to happen?
And shelter as not just a physical thing as well, but shelter as a poetic terminology to describe the impact of what the Droneport could be. And so shelter means safety. Shelter means I'm comfortable to share things that I'm not comfortable sharing. Shelter means I can talk about the most awkward political situations in a place and not feel scared that it's going to turn out really bad. So shelter as a physical term, but also a metaphor and a poetry behind what this space could be is very, very important.
So we're going to be talking a little bit about the guidelines for construction. A lot of the ideas we have been presenting are very abstract, but how do you actually build this? What are the guidelines for actual construction and feasibility?
So I'm going to go through these really fast so we have time for questions, and I would love to get out of here with more questions so that people can really go think about these things. So like we talked about, the materials need to be local. One of the things we observed yesterday at the island is one of the most available materials is the least utilized material on the island. And so that's very important for us to, thank you, I need a lot of help. is the least utilized material. And so that's something we need to consider. And then we need to also understand the life cycle of these materials and how best we can limit waste and increase utilization of a very rich material on the island. And then we have to challenge and think about, is the Droneport going to be something temporal or it's going to be permanent? Is this something that is going to change when drone technology changes in 2 years? I mean, it's amazing. For just the last 3 days, we moved from a very small drone to the Wild Food Program presentation of a spaceship that could carry probably 3 times as many people that are in this room, right? So it's going to change. Technology is going to change, and we need to think about that. And then we need to think about enclosure and opacity. What does that mean in this context, and what does that mean in a context of allowing it to serve as a civic space as well as serve the technical purposes that it has to. And then local labor is something that is very important. To me, as part of the challenge for the Lake Victoria Challenge, is to really think about what additional skills can we bring to that community. And I would challenge any team to go into the community if they had to invent a new construction method, that's something that needs to be replicable and deployable in multiple different dimensions on the island. And then training and development, again, as the process of construction needs to involve the local skilled folks down there who have actually a lot more knowledge than we can bring to the table for sure. And then phasing and scalability. We talked about having a prototype built, because the prototype, we can spend a lot of time designing things, and then you go out there, build it, and you quickly realize, no, actually, it can't work, and it just won't work. And so we encourage to actually have a prototype to go out there, not only to test the structure strength of these things, but it also tests the perception of the community of this thing that now you're introducing. So if the prototype sits out there for 6 months, it will give you a very good understanding whether this is something acceptable or it's just a really good idea. So I think Droneports create just enormous opportunities. And to me, it's just exciting to think about that we, as a community, as thinkers in our different fields, we could sit here and think about the possibilities in Africa, the possibilities of creating a new typology of what civic spaces are and how that could impact African communities as a whole. So again, I would say a Droneport is a place. It is not an object. It is not a building. It is a place that people go to and have a good time. And then the drones, in my mind, are a supplement to the power of what civic spaces are. Now, this can't go without saying Asante Sana. So I'd like to open this up for some questions, and we'll be glad to ask somebody maybe to take some notes of these questions or keep track of the questions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was a very interesting presentation, and I think you're spot on. The last few days we've been doing a lot of flying on Juma Island, and we actually set up a little structure that you would think of maybe, and some services, and you can think of that already as a little drone. It was completely functional for us. One or two comments. One is, have you thought about setting standards? Because right now there's a lot of companies that are planning to have different modalities of delivering items and operating, and to what extent should we be setting a certain standard of how to do certain things? What kind of UTM services should be set up? Or should it be more of a plug and play, bring your own module and set it up? So I think that's a very interesting question going forward. And second, you said it has to be women-centric, and I I see that and I completely agree. I'm talking about drones a lot at a lot of events, and I've made it a habit to count the women in the rooms, and it tends to be less than 5%. And I would, of most attendees, and I think it's a matter of creating an accepting space, and also it's a matter of mentorship, because we have a lot of leaders in this room, very influential people, and I think it's important that especially if you are male and have been given a position, that you start fostering and mentoring women as much as men. And so, yeah, thank you very much. That's just my 2 points.
Yeah, I think that's really good. I would like to pick up something to note. I think a lot of organizations in this room have power to design frameworks. And I think part of the challenge in developing countries is that we spend a lot of time solving problems and very little time designing frameworks through which problems can be solved over time. And so that's, to me, that's very, very critical, that we cannot spend our time figuring out how to deliver something from one point to another without spending a lot of time to design the framework through which more problems in that regard could actually be solved.
Thanks very much, David Guerin, risk specialist and air traffic management expert. I don't really know which way to face. I'm sorry, but I've got a few questions that I have to, or points I have to make. The first thing is you need to do a Droneport simulation or a safety evaluation trial for your Droneport. There's a lot of trade-offs. Potentially it could be a floating Droneport. Please, with this whole area opens itself up to lakeside use. Don't put it in the centre of the island. If you have to put it there, do, yes, but please put it near the coast. You reduce your risk. You're flying over water, not people. You could use the breaker. You could use the flyox as an example to fly inland and exchange things. The size of it, when you go to an airport, any airport, the runway is not where the soccer pitch is, the football pitch. You know, consider the space. You can't just put a box and fly drones into it, in my opinion. I don't think you can ever change the risk of hitting people. So plan on that. Perhaps have a car park around it, you know, where people are protected in vehicles, or think that through. You've really got to consider the size of it, and an investment comes to airports. You know, there's always some investment and operations at airports because there's clear space. Of organised data is a big problem. You don't know where you need to put this. You don't know where the conventional aircraft are, and this is one of those places in the world where there is no Flight Radar 24 receiver. So we don't know where the aircraft here are. It's a process I tried with air traffic control. They've been very helpful, but to get the data of where the planes go and where you don't want to be is difficult. So next week, Flight Radar 24 has sponsored Mwanza Tower, and we receive an ADS-B receiver. We can then map out, we can get data of where the aircraft are around Mwanza and avoid that. And finally, the roof structure. If you are flying into a building like that, this is something we've discovered, you know, quite often. It's nice to have a strong, solid roof. You could perhaps have that as a landing site. But remembering if you're flying in underneath it as well, you'll lose your GPS connectivity, so you'll lose control of the aircraft possibly. So, thanks very much.
David, I might just interject on that. I think the purpose of this talk was not in any way to circumvent or, I mean, we started with the assumption of the most maximum safety requirements, and we are assuming that by 2022, 2023, we'll have propulsion systems that make sense. We'll have a regulatory environment and supporting technologies that can enable such a Droneport to practically fly 8 to 15 flights a day. It may be that the safety requirements are too onerous and that the technology requirements are not met at the price point that these people who are relatively poor can afford. But we have to make that architectural design
evolution right now on the assumption that you and the engineers will make it work. But of course, you're absolutely right that whatever form of a Droneport will be, whether it's iconic and low carbon or whatever, then the primary thing a Droneport has to be is safe and functional. So I think your knowledge and those of all air traffic controllers is absolutely the ground starting point.
I'd like to add quickly to that. This is the minimum framework, so even I know our diagrams showed a box. That it doesn't mean it has to be a box, and we really wanted to emphasize that from the beginning. This might not even be a building. It could be something that's open to an extent. Maybe it just has some cover for civic purposes, but maybe the drone portion does not. So trying to, I guess, think about it so concretely this early, I think, is kind of putting ourselves in a very narrow mindset. And I think that the safety concern is very real, and collaborating once this starts becoming developed to make those be priorities from the beginning will allow it to function as it should.
I really congratulate the team, the way they worked, and was able to come with these very interesting suggestions as of now. Certainly, we have to elevate a little bit the ideas that they have put across. And very correctly, Joe is saying the Droneport is not the building, but the place. But also the place is different from a space. And therefore, that space needs to be articulated, and you cannot articulate the land itself, but the surroundings by providing the services. And in so doing, you are creating the built environment of these structures. And now these structures are the ones actually going to define the Droneport very well. And so I think architecturally, the building surrounding now that place or the space is where to bring the knowledge of architecture to such that it becomes iconic to the passerby who are walking or even flying over. Now, I was just wondering how actually we can integrate the land and the air, because the drone is something flying over and coming to land, on the land. And I was just thinking loud, can we have a space up there where the drone can come and land, like the helipad? Some of the hotels, we see bringing the hotels over the hotel roof, and that's it. So we could even think how we can integrate the land and the space up there above the structures that we are saying gonna articulate the space of the Droneport, which we thought of at the beginning, but we are elevating a little bit from there onwards. Thank you.
It's a very good point. I think everything will depend on the type of airframe and the performance of airframes. If you can imagine a wing copter or similar to a wing copter evolving, to be a little bit larger and to be entirely as dependable as the Chinese motorbike, then yes, you probably could have a tower structure, but I'm not sure that that will be the final design of medium, small-sized cargo drones. I'll just finish. Well, first of all, thank you so much to Joel and Daniela. You were up all night and really appreciate it. I think just the final point, what we're trying to do here is a little bit mischievous, really. We're trying to game the drone delivery business before the drone delivery business actually happens. And we're trying to game that industry on behalf of poorer communities who maybe have low margin goods to sell and
and don't have so much money to buy. But if you establish a network which is sufficiently complex and interconnected and dependable, then the volume of goods being shipped on that network will be transformative, just as the mobile phone has proved to be transformative in Africa. So thank you so much. And a big shout out to Edward, actually. Thank you, since I'm on the stage. Well done on everything. And I just want to add one final point, which is Joel told me this morning that when he was a young boy growing up in a very poor community in Uganda, the World Bank offered him a scholarship to the United States. 3 weeks. Was it 3 weeks? Yeah. And it transformed his life. So I think it's entirely appropriate, Joel, that the World Bank is transforming your life again. Thank you.
Kweli wazo nzuri. Droneport sio jengo fulani tu, ni mahali ambapo watu wote wanaweza kutumia. So that concludes our morning for right now. We will proceed to a lunch break. Before then, I have a few announcements before we continue. One, during our break today, we will not have any demo flights. Over the past few days, we had some of those, but there will not be any demo flights during this break. However, we encourage you, if you have not done so already and you are interested, to sign up for the hands-on training today at 3:30. So at 3:30 p.m., there will be a mafunzo in which you can have some experience with some hands-on experience with drones. So if you're still interested in that, please sign up as soon as you can. You should be able to sign up at the expo space. As well, at the expo space, like I said before, you can see the Droneport model, you can see the Zipline's drone there. You can take a look at it and ask them some questions about their drone. As well as there's a Droneport model down there as well. I encourage you to pass by and take a look at, and let's keep having some good conversations. I'd like to ask everyone to be back here at 1:30 p.m. So sasaba nanusu. Let's all be back here sharp so we can continue with our last session. Asanteni sana.